Before you send your daughter to boarding school, watch this. What happens behind those gates will shock you. The sun had set behind the distant hills, casting an orange glow over the fields surrounding St. Agnes Girls' College. It was during the dry season that the land seemed to sleep beneath the weight of the heat, and the girls, tucked away in their dormitories, found it hard to escape the stillness that hung like a heavy curtain over everything. Inside Grace Hostel, the walls were thick with silence, but to Ebere, it was a silence that crawled beneath the skin, like something was waiting in the shadows. Ebere had always been a quiet girl, one who preferred the soft hum of her thoughts to the boisterous chatter of her peers. Yet tonight, the quiet seemed unnatural, unsettling. Ebere lay on her bed. Eyes wide, her mind restless. She could hear her roommate Amara's steady breathing, her body relaxed, every part of her at ease in the stillness of the night. Amara, with her confidence and her boldness, seemed untouched by the atmosphere that crept through the dorm. She was fast asleep, but Ebere could feel the weight of something ominous, an unseen presence that hovered in the corners of the room. I must be imagining things, Ebere thought, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. It's just my nerves. I'm just tired. But even as she whispered those words to herself, a shiver ran down her spine. The footsteps came again. Soft at first, barely audible. But they grew louder with each passing minute. Until they were unmistakable. Someone was walking in the hallway. Ebere could hear them clearly now, the slow shuffle of feet against the wooden floor, deliberate, calculated. It wasn't a random sound. It was as though someone was pacing, just outside her room, her pulse quickened, her breath shallow. She held her body still, as though not breathing would somehow protect her from whatever was out there. The sound grew closer. The footsteps stopped at her door. Her heart hammered in her chest. And then, just like that, the steps faded into nothing. Ebere lay frozen for what seemed like an eternity, but no more sound came. She dared not move, dared not even breathe. But when she could no longer hear the footsteps, she allowed herself to shift slightly, her eyes scanning the dimly lit room. Was it real? Or was it just my imagination? The days grew longer as the dry season settled in, and with it, the tension at St. Agnes Girls' College began to rise. Ebere's eyes were heavy from lack of sleep, and even the bustling campus couldn't shake the sense of unease that gripped her. She went through the motions, attending classes, studying for exams, pretending to be just like everyone else, but the nagging feeling of being watched never left her. The other girls, oblivious to her inner turmoil, went about their days in typical fashion. Amara, always the life of the group, seemed to have no worries at all. She flitted between classes with ease, cracking jokes, offering advice, her laughter ringing through the hallways. She was the kind of person who took life head-on, fearless in a way that Ebere could never be. But Ebere couldn't talk to Amara about her fears. How could she? Amara would laugh at her, just as everyone else did when she'd hinted at the footsteps that haunted her at night. One afternoon, after classes, Chica, a senior girl from Hope Hostel, approached her. Chica had always been a talkative one, the kind who always had something to say about everything. But today, her voice was quieter, tinged with something more serious. Ebere, have you heard anything strange at night? Chica asked, her voice low and hesitant. Ebere's stomach tightened. She nodded slowly, not trusting herself to speak at first. The dread she had carried for days was now surfacing in front of her. It's been happening for days now, hasn't it? Chica continued, glancing over her shoulder. The footsteps. I've heard them too, outside my room. But no one seems to talk about it. Not openly. Everyone just pretends nothing is happening. Ebere's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't imagined it after all. It's not just you, Chica said, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. But I don't know what to think about it. I spoke to a few of the girls, and they said it was nothing, just your imagination. But it's not, is it? Ebere shook her head. No. It's real. And I'm scared. Chica, for once, didn't laugh or brush it off. Instead, she gave Ebere a steady look, as though trying to decide whether to believe her. You're not the only one, Chica said quietly. I'll speak to some of the others. Maybe we can find out what's going on here. As the nights dragged on, Ebere's fear deepened. The footsteps were no longer just noises in the night. They had become something more, something sinister. Amara, at last, noticed how pale and distracted Ebere had become. The once vibrant girl who spoke of dreams and ambitions now looked like a ghost, her eyes hollow, her steps slow. One evening, after classes, Amara sat Ebere down in their room, her expression serious for the first time in a long while. "Ebere, I need to know what's going on. This isn't like you." Ebere swallowed hard, but the words spilled out before she could stop them. "There's something out there, Amara. Something. Watching us. I've heard footsteps, seen shadows moving outside the window, and I don't know who to turn to. The headmistress won't listen. Everyone says I'm imagining things. But I'm not. I know what I heard." Amara's face softened. She had always been the brave one, the one who faced challenges head-on. But this was different. She wasn't sure what to believe, but she could see how deeply frightened Ebere was. "You're not imagining things," Amara said firmly. "We'll do something about it. We'll talk to the others, and we'll make sure the school knows what's happening. We won't face this alone." That night, the girls gathered in secret. The prayer circle was their first step, an act of solidarity and faith. Chica, Lillian, and a few others from Grace Hostel joined, bringing their strength to the circle. Each girl, young and old, had faced their own fears, and now, they would face them together. They sat in silence for a moment before Amara's voice broke the stillness, soft but full of power. "We face this together. No fear will stand in our way. We pray for courage, for strength, and for protection. We will not let the darkness win." Night after night, the footsteps grew louder. The darkness seemed to encircle Grace Hostel, creeping into the girls' rooms, settling in the corners where the light never reached. The air was thick with dread, and even the once vibrant campus seemed to fall silent. As if it, too, were holding its breath, Ebere spent her nights in fear, clutching her Bible, listening to the sound of footsteps creeping closer to her room. The other girls slept soundly, but not Ebere. The fear grew louder in the silence. Then one night, the footsteps came again. Only this time, they were not just outside her door. They were inside. The door creaked open slowly. Ebere's heart pounded in her chest as she watched a shadow move past her door, creeping closer. It was no longer a vague fear. It had a presence now, a dark, looming presence that filled the room with a cold, suffocating air. Ebere's hand shook as she grabbed her Bible. She whispered a prayer under her breath. The words shaky but full of resolve. "No. I will not let this consume me. I am not alone." The shadow stopped in front of her door, just out of sight. Ebere could feel it. He was there, waiting. The predator stumbled, tripping over his own feet as he tried to escape. As they rounded the corner, Amara led the charge, her Bible held firmly in her hand, her voice a beacon of defiance. The girls followed her, undeterred by the darkness, the cold air, or the shadows that danced around them. "You will not win," Amara shouted, her voice echoing. He turned and fled, his heavy steps quickening as he scrambled toward the exit. But the girls did not stop. They pursued him. As they reached the edge of the school grounds, the predator scrambled to climb over the high fence that separated the dormitory from the rest of the school. The girls were right behind him, their hands reaching out. The predator managed to scramble over the top of the fence and disappear into the night. The girls stood at the gate, breathing heavily, watching as the darkness receded with the predator's flight. Inside Grace Hostel, the girls who had faced the terror the night before gathered in the common room. They sat together, their hearts light, their spirits filled with the satisfaction of victory. Ebere sat quietly, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. She no longer felt the suffocating weight of fear that had held her captive for so long. She glanced over at Amara, who was speaking softly to Chica and the other girls. There was no arrogance in Amara's voice, no boastful pride. Only a quiet satisfaction, the knowledge that they had done what seemed impossible. "We did it, Ebere," Amara said, sitting down beside her, her voice full of warmth. "Together, we were stronger than any fear." Ebere nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. "It's over, isn't it?" Ebere asked, her voice soft. Amara nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's over. But it's not just about what we faced. It's about what we learned." The girls who had stood together through the darkness continued to walk side by side, their bond unbreakable. They had faced their fears and emerged victorious. Their story became one that was passed down through the generations, a tale of courage, friendship, and the power of faith. And every year, as the dry season returned and the sun cast its long shadows across the land, the girls of Grace Hostel would remember that night when fear had come, but courage had stood its ground.